Good evening. Today marks the start of Phase 1 of Singapore's reopening. You're watching The Big Story with Haryanto Deman. I'm Olivia Quay.
If you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe to the Straits Times channel if you haven't already done so. Singapore has emerged from the 8-week circuit breaker and is now embarking on Phase 1 of its safe reopening. About 75% of the economy will resume operations in this phase, although retail shops remain closed and dining in at restaurants and other food outlets is still disallowed.
The Straits Times hit the streets on the first day of Singapore's safe reopening to capture the nation waking up from the circuit breaker slumber. Trains and buses were crowded as more people were allowed to return to work and school. Social distancing was still observed where possible, even though the safe distancing stickers plastered on alternate seats had been removed. The CBD was also bustling again, with businesses in critical and low-risk settings resuming operations. Business also picked up at the hawker centres in the CBD area, although dining in is still not allowed. Meanwhile, those looking to get their hair done can now enjoy full hairdressing services, including hair colouring and treatments. Phase 1 of Singapore's safe reopening is expected to last a few weeks.
Schools reopen today. Across schools, daily face-to-face classes will be conducted only for the graduating cohorts of Primary 6 and Secondary 4 and 5. Those in Primary 4 and 5 and Secondary 1 and 2 were also at school today, but they will rotate weekly, with students from the remaining batches between home-based learning and having lessons in class.
During a visit to Xingnan Primary School this morning, Education Minister Ong Ye Kung said it's a good time to reopen schools, given that it could be a year or more before a COVID-19 vaccine is found, and since there are currently few new cases in the community.
For our children, the impact on their growing up will be very severe in terms of their mental, character, social, emotional development. That will be very, very drastic. And we must remember, education is really not just about taking exam and getting the grades. It's about their whole character and social, emotional development. And we cannot deprive a whole generation of that experience. The impact is on the whole generation.
Xingnan Primary saw 96% attendance today, and Minister Ong said teething issues were expected as students return after 2 months with new rules in place.
Watching everything is orderly, it's very calm. You can see a palpable sense of enthusiasm amongst the teachers and the students that they are coming back to school. When I'm around, they are more quiet, but once I leave, they are actually very excited. So I think it all is going quite well. Attendance rate, I just asked the principal, he told me 96% for those that are supposed to come back. So actually that is very high for a term start and also very encouraging. It shows that people do want to come back to school.
Tightened safety measures at Xingnan Primary include designated toilets, wipe-down routines and mandatory wearing of face shields or masks.
We have to wear the mask. That's a big difference for me because I'm not very used to wearing a mask, and it's more suffocating. You can't breathe well, and it also makes you more warm.
We have already got masks made by our school uniform vendor for our students. We want them to have different kinds of colors. We want the students to personalize their masks, put buttons, maybe put ribbons, put their name. So if you own the mask, then perhaps you will want to use it.
So as schools resume classes today, let's talk about this new normal for students with journalist Jolene Ang and education correspondent Amelia Teng. Jolene, I'll start with you. You were at Xingnan Primary School with Minister Ong. He mentioned there was bound to be teething issues. What did you observe?
Okay, so today, early in the morning, when we were all there, the teachers were actually standing around the entrance of the school to remind students to remember to keep a space between each other when they were walking in. And the teachers were also checking to see if the kids were wearing their mask correctly. So for example, there were some who had worn the mask just below the nose, so they didn't cover the nose. So the teachers would stop them and teach them the correct way to wear the mask. So the school had also come up with different routes for each cohort to get to their classrooms. So because the P4, 5, and 6s were back in school today, there were different signages and even like physical barriers to minimize any possible interaction between students as they made their way to their classrooms for assembly. And I think for the toilets, there are also designated toilets for each cohort.
How about you, Amelia? You accompanied a primary 6 student from Jingshan Primary School today. What did you take note of?
I think for me, what stood out to me was the sheer number of rules and measures to remember. So the form teachers spent like in the morning they had like the assembly, and then they took the pledge in the classroom, and the principal gave like a Zoom speech to all the classes, and then it was followed by like only 1 hour briefing of all the different measures. And I mean, there's a really long list of measures that they have to remember, and I don't remember them myself. But everything pointed to the kids always needing to have a personal bubble, like a personal bubble of space around them wherever they went throughout the whole day. So meal times, they have to, if they don't bring food from home, they go to the canteen and they sit in according to register numbers. If they are eating in the classroom, they have to sit in single file while eating. And the strange thing is that they can't talk to their friends, so they're eating in silence. And
Oh dear.
yeah, so it's a scene that I've never seen before during a recess, which is meant to be something like where the kids usually all are running about, but this was very different. Another thing that stood out to me was the PE lesson. So usually PE you will have like group activities like captain's ball or soccer or whatever, but for today's PE lesson, they also had that personal bubble of space. So they were simply like in one spot learning how to dribble basketball. So they had to queue to get the ball. Then they had to wipe the ball, they had to sanitize their hands, and then they actually did not move from that spot during the whole PE lesson. So yeah, I mean, it's that personal space that they're really trying to inculcate in the kids now.
Right. Well, Jolene, back to you. Did you speak to any of the students over at Singnan Primary School? We heard from Amelia that I guess the measures at Jingshan didn't really allow for any socialization among the students. Did you observe anything different?
Yeah, so one pupil that I spoke to said that she was happy to be able to spend more time with her family in the past 2 months with the circuit breaker and also with the May holiday. But she was also happy to be back in school, to see her teachers and her friends and learn together with them in class. But I think one thing that a lot of the kids brought up was that they had to make some adjustments to their interaction with each other. So maybe previously when they see each other in school, after a long break, they would hug each other or they would tap each other's shoulders in greeting. But now they can't do that, so they just do things like wave to each other from a distance. And I think some others also said that having to wear the mask is something that takes some getting used to, especially when you have to wear it almost the entire day, only when you're eating or when you're having PE lessons, exercising. So I think for the kids, they feel that it's quite uncomfortable. One of them actually described it as suffocating. And it's a bit hard to breathe, and it can also make them feel a bit warm throughout the day. Yeah.
Well, other primary and secondary school cohorts return to school next week, and they'll alternate between school and home-based learning every week. So, Amelia, from what you saw today, can schools cope, you think, with safe distancing with more students in school? Do the schools have the space?
I think so today, yeah, it was just the upper primary level that the school I was at. But because it was only upper primary, so not all the teachers are back in school yet. The rest of them were still at home doing home-based learning. But when more students come back, yeah, it will be, I think, a little bit more challenging to maintain that personal space, more students, more teachers around. But the teachers will be the ones to constantly try to encourage and enforce that safe distancing measures. So they are doing things like staggered dismissal timings, having different gates designated to different classes. So I think while it will be challenging, the schools will be able to cope. I mean, they will have to with more students coming back.
Right. Well, Jolene, for parents still worried about their children returning to school, do you think the measures in schools are well managed to allay those fears? Did Minister Ong say anything to that effect?
I think for parents, because we've been speaking to quite a number of them over the past few weeks, one big concern for them is how the schools will be enforcing social distancing and things like making them wear masks, making sure they don't mingle with each other. Because I mean, a lot of times they say kids will be kids, and it may be hard to force them to follow certain rules. But from what I've seen today, the schools have been prioritizing explaining the rationale for certain rules to the kids instead of making them blindly follow them. And the teachers have also been, they appear to be very present to remind the kids, at least from what I saw today. And also for the mask wearing, the principal of the school that I went to today, Xingnan Primary, right? The principal actually said that they're trying to come up with fun ways to get kids to wear the mask, and even if it may be uncomfortable, maybe they can have fun doing so. So they are actually planning to get the students to decorate their own masks. So they ordered a bunch of masks from the school uniform vendor, and then they're planning to let the students personalize their own mask so that they have some ownership, and they see the mask as part of the new normal life. Yeah. So the schools are being very careful, and that is also one reason why the reopening is being done in phases, prioritizing the graduating cohort. And the hope is that schools will be able to adjust and get used to the measures over a month or so, and finally be able to have everyone back together. And the other thing that Minister Ong said, the school reopening is also partly to help parents as we exit the circuit breaker, with some parents having to go back to work, and they might need a safe environment for their kids. So, some kids might be restless after this 2 months of staying at home, and they might want to go out more. So instead of having them go out sort of unsupervised, it might be better to have them in school with supervision from the teachers and the staff. So I think that was also a good point.
Well, thanks for that, Jolene. So let's shift our focus now to preschools. Amelia, about 75,000 kindergarten 1 and 2 children were set to return to their preschools today as well. What sort of operational changes that some preschools have made?
So there are many changes, especially for preschools, from the drop-off to the pickup and everything in between. During classes, they used to have like bigger group activities, and now all that has been suspended. Now the kids will take turns between different activities. Some of them could do activities on the floor, then the others will do on a tabletop. Meal routines, shower routines, nap time has also changed. They have suspended full shower routine, and now they only do it on a case-by-case basis, and only when it's needed, like when the kid has spilled food on himself. For meals, there are also limits as to how many kids can be at a table at one shot. So many changes. Also for teachers can now only manage up to 2 each, meaning you cannot you have to minimize contact with children, and especially children from other classes, and staff cannot eat in groups. To minimize contact, you can only eat in your own classroom or your own work bay. No face-to-face meetings. So many restrictions that they have to get used to. School has reopened, but it's not really the same as it used to be. We've been speaking to many preschool educators over the last few weeks, and I think besides all the logistics and operations, COVID has also affected learning in a way because of all the constraints. So in terms of learning, there's very little outdoor play now that the children can go. They don't have that kind of flexibility to use outdoor spaces. So I think one of the St. James principals was saying that now this is a chance to kind of like imagine what learning is, and to think of creative solutions to substitute what they can't do anymore. So I think that stood out to me as well, because in a pandemic like this, we tend to think of things more negatively and what we can't do, what we are not allowed to do anymore. But they as educators are trying to think on and to think of solutions to let the kids continue learning, but within the constraints. So for instance, like outdoor play, they're thinking of simulating indoors by using like virtual projections, of settings like a forest or a beach, and then you can get the kids to role play, dig some sand.
Right.
Yeah, and birthday cake celebrations, things that used to be like quite big things in preschools, now they're not allowed. They can't even give out goodie bags anymore. So the teachers are also trying to think of how to make these moments special for the kids. Even if the parents can't come into school, maybe they can plan surprises with the teachers, behind the kids' back, or record video clips, play birthday songs in the center. So the preschools are trying to get around the problem by thinking of it not as a problem, but a way to
right.
as
Thinking
an
outside the
opportunity.
box, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah,
Amelia
exactly, yeah.
and Jolene, thank you so much for taking the time. I've been speaking to education correspondent Amelia Teng, as well as journalist Jolene Ang. Schools reopen today as Singapore starts phase 1.
Singapore reported 554 new COVID-19 cases today, including 4 community cases. 3 of them are work pass holders, while the 4th is a Singaporean or permanent resident. Migrant workers living in dormitories make up the majority of the cases. Today's count brings the total here to 35,836. More details will be released later.
In other news, 6 men and a woman allegedly linked to a group gathering in Robertson Quay were charged today for flouting circuit breaker measures under the COVID-19 Temporary Measures Act. 4 of them were accused of meeting one another near an Italian restaurant in Merbau Road for a social purpose in the evening of May 16th. Separately, the other 3 allegedly met one another near a tap at Robertson Quay on the same day. The cases have been adjourned to June the 16th.
Ride-hailing firm Grab will introduce precautionary measures from end June, which include disallowing passengers to ride in the front seat beside the driver. This means a regular 4-seater car will only take up to 3 passengers. Passengers will also have to fill in health and hygiene declarations before each trip. Both drivers and passengers will also be able to cancel rides if the other party appears unwell or isn't wearing a mask. The party who cancels the trip will not be liable to any penalty.
Meanwhile, national carrier Singapore Airlines is resuming flights to several destinations in June and July, as well as increasing the number of flights for some of its other services. The airline will be flying to 27 cities in the 2 months, up from the 15 that had been earlier announced for this month. SIA said yesterday that these flights are subject to regulatory approvals and changes.
As we embark on a new normal post-circuit breaker, a phased approach to reopening Singapore will help protect both lives and livelihoods, but Singaporeans must get used to this new normal of living with restrictions. In a phone interview today with Money FM 89.3, National Development Minister Lawrence Wong said the process of reopening is a very tricky one. He added that the government is prioritising both lives and livelihoods while ensuring that it has the capabilities to test and contact trace on a large scale.
As cases emerge, we make sure we have the ability to control, to quickly detect, ring-fence, isolate these cases and prevent large clusters from forming. So what we will be looking out for over the next 2 weeks are the community infection numbers, the daily community infection numbers. We want to keep them low and stable. It's not just about whether it's single digit. I think it may rise, but if we can continue to keep control over the situation, meaning to say each time a case comes up, we are able to quickly detect and then identify all the close contacts and isolate and ring-fence the cluster.
Minister Wong's full interview is on the Straits Times Facebook and YouTube platforms, as well as Money FM 89.3's website.
Although shops will have to stay closed during phase 1, about 75% of the economy resume operations today. Let's find out about the immediate impact of this on SMEs with President of the Association of Small and Medium Enterprises, Kurt Wee. Now, Kurt, it's good to have you back. Kurt, SMEs make up Singapore's largest employers. Many of your members would have been allowed to start operations today. How did they feel about it? Relief, perhaps?
I think a lot of members are sort of facing the reopening with a bit of apprehension. You know, we have been working with a lot of different industries and sectors to inform them of the need to really first primarily look at all the needs to implement the relevant safe distancing measures, health and safety measures, and how do you, if you have workforce, how do you do cohorting, and how do you do some of these things, and really emphasize to businesses the primary focus on these practices over and above before other things, because it's so important that they get these basics in place, because COVID is not just here for a few months. We all have a part to play in terms of keeping the workplace safe, keeping interaction safe, so that we don't have another flare or another wave of infections. And so, you know, businesses have been really putting in effort towards this area. We see industries such as the optical industries, 60, 80 shops of them coming together to sort of develop SOP safety operating procedures. We saw spa and wellness industry, about 100 of them grouping together to develop some level of uniform practice that, you know, they could put up for review. And also to basically drum it down amongst all their business owners, the necessary practice in preparation for the reopening.
What were some of the challenges that some of the SMEs faced, for example, Kurt, in order to be able to start work again in phase 1?
So, you know, it's really got to do with really looking at my own operations and understanding what kind of implementations I need to do, right? Whether it's just internal operations within the company, I need to do team division, team A, team B, or if I have workforce, I need to do cohorting, or, you know, if I deal with customers, then what are my procedures and how I deal with my customers? So I think a lot of the businesses have been doing this level of preparation. And when the announcement came out, of course, everybody had hoped that they could open on 2nd of June, but not, you know, it's really going to take in phases. And we had to, you know, inform the businesses that, you know, we've only got one chance to do this right. And we want to do it right the first time. And so then, you know, we then convince businesses that the speed to opening and trying to rush for capacity should not be a priority. And I think businesses have been putting in a lot of effort towards that area and making sure that they have the correct procedures in place. Of course, they want to open fast. Of course, they want to open early. But I think they also understand the need for health and safety. And I think even they also understand that by implementing some of these practices, it actually would put a cap on their turnover capacity. In most cases, about 50, 60% cap on their sales capacity. But, you know, it's better to have some level of activity than no level of activity. And in addition to that, I think businesses have also been pivoting towards online models or delivery models or you know, telecommuting sort of a model to sort of looking at how they can do their work differently but achieve the same outcome. And I think with all these kind of efforts put in place and with a bit of pivoting, probably business can push their business turnover back to maybe about 50, 60% level of what was before. It will mean that, you know, some may not be able to sustain the cash flow and the cost load. It may continue to mean some business that will be rationalized and there might be some retrenchment, but I think some of those negative impacts have already been substantially cushioned away by the government's assistance measures namely the job support scheme that has been extending a wage support to businesses. I think it's great that it's been extended to June for those that, and it will be extended beyond June for those that can't open. I think that's clear recognition that the government sees the time that businesses need to sort of ramp up. And the other piece that I think it's been quite useful for businesses really is the rental rebate push.
Right, Kurt. Kurt, the Manpower Ministry said working from home for non-essential work should be the default for phases 1 and 2. How difficult or easy is it for SMEs to adhere to a predominantly work from home situation?
Okay, so I think there are two minds to this. There's some extent of desk-bound, office-bound work. Previously, you would travel for meetings, and now you do meetings by Zoom. So there's actually a quite large segment of the working population that's pretty now acclimatized to working from home. And I think for those particular group, for them to continue to work from home, I think might be okay. It's not so great a departure. But there are certain business segments that cannot work from home. They need to be in operations. They need to work with their teams, and they need to perform interdepartmental roles as well. So I think it will be a relief for those segments that they can get back into business operations. We've heard also from, for example, from the contractors, renovation, construction industry. That particular sector is a multi-player, multi-company activity most of the time, and it doesn't just extend into the construction company or the renovation or contractor company themselves, but it extends also into their suppliers, their professional consultants, even their clients. So June is really going to be a time whereby the whole ecosystem attempts to get its operative act in place, and we hope that by mid-July, things will be a lot more flowing and stable.
Right. Well, Kurt, SMEs have a lot of measures to put in place, telecommuting, safe distancing. So how does implementing all of these measures affect their ability to make money, especially for smaller businesses who may not have resources? What would phase 1 and even phase 2 mean for their recovery?
Well, in some ways, conducting meetings by Zoom means you save a lot of time traveling. It does raise your productivity, but you can't get to a level of conversation that you can get to when you're physically face-to-face with the person on the other side of the table. And I think for those SMEs that are operative in a consumer nature, and they serve customers, whether you're F&B or retail, I think safe distancing and some of these measures would mean limited appointments that they can see, or limited customers that they can see. Typically, we estimate that they cap the capacity at about 50% level, which is why pivoting to some of the other digital models, in addition to their existing business operation, will be very key in supplementing that turnover. Now, bear in mind that total effort would still not equate to what it was before COVID, but as we said, now there is the GSS wage subsidy to sort of cushion your cost impact, as some rental measures to have helped you with your first half year of battle. So what we want to do is, focus on the second half year of battle, from July right through to December, and sufficiently transform, sufficiently pivot with all the necessary health safety measures in place, so that you can hit a level where you can be viable and sustainable. It will come with some cost cutting and even some manpower cost cutting. It may not need to come in a manpower headcount cut, may come in the form of wage cuts. But I think what we want to do is try and save as many businesses and get them operational as much as possible.
Wow. Great points there, Kurt. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time. We've been speaking to Kurt Wee, President of the Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. Let's go to Jolene Ang now for the top global stories.
Thanks, guys. China reported 10 new asymptomatic coronavirus cases yesterday, compared with 16 one day earlier. 5 new imported infections were also confirmed. The total number of China's confirmed cases stands at over 83,000. There have been 4,634 deaths. New Zealand could remove most of its remaining restrictions as soon as next week. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said the government will bring forward its decision on a further relaxation to next Monday, and that the nation's alert level could be reduced to 1, which denotes very few restrictions. New Zealand has just 1 active case remaining, a woman linked to a cluster at a nursing home. The assertion by a top Italian doctor that the coronavirus is losing its potency has been contested by the World Health Organization. Experts said that there was no evidence to support the claims. They said there is no data to show that the virus is changing significantly, both in terms of severity and form of transmission. The International Civil Aviation Organization, with the help of the World Health Organization and International Air Transport Association, have published a series of guidelines for airlines as the industry looks to relaunch air travel. Among them are the mandatory wearing of masks in aircrafts and terminals, temperature checks, and the frequent disinfection of planes. The suggested changes are the most significant since heightened security measures were put in place after the 9/11 attack in 2001. That's all we have for our global updates. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Dylan. As we start phase 1 of Singapore's safe reopening, more questions continue to pour into the Straits Times Ask ST column on what is allowed and not allowed during this period. We'll tackle some questions on the safe management measures for businesses.
First up, if you're wondering why certain companies get to resume operations first in phase 1, well, the objective of this phase is to resume economic and social activities in a safe and progressive manner. More workers will gradually be allowed to return to work, starting with businesses that operate in settings with lower transmission risks. Where possible, employees must work from home to the maximum extent, and before resuming activities, businesses must comply with the requirements for safe management measures and any sector-specific requirements.
Next question. How can I implement staggered working and break hours at the workplace? Staggered working hours can be implemented over at least 3 one-hourly blocks, with not more than half of the employees reporting to work within each 1-hour block. Reporting and ending times should not coincide with peak hour travel where possible, especially if employees need to use public transport. If it's not feasible to implement staggered hours due to operational reasons, employers must implement other systems to reduce the chances of employees gathering at common spaces, for example, by arranging for different groups to arrive through different entrances.
Last one, my business is included in the list of permitted services. Do I need to submit any manpower details when I resume operations? Yes, you do. All businesses must submit information on the number of workers working on site via the COVID Go Business portal within 2 weeks after resuming operations. Businesses that fail to do so will be in breach of the COVID-19 Temporary Measures Act and can be fined, imprisoned, or both. Businesses must also keep a list of employees with their working arrangements, including details of employees working in shifts, the time they arrive and leave the workplace, as well as their break hours and split team arrangements. Companies don't have to submit these details via the COVID Go Business portal, but will have to show the documentation to enforcement officers upon request.
Going back to what we just covered in Ask ST, more people are returning to the workplace today as phase 1 of Singapore's safe reopening kicks in. While some may look forward to going back to the workplace after being away for some time, others may not feel as comfortable and would rather continue to work from home. The rule is for employees to continue to work from home to the maximum extent, and for businesses to resume operations, safe management measures must be in place to maintain the well-being of the employees.
In the event, employees are told to return to the office but discover that their employers haven't adhered to the government's advisories, or if they don't feel comfortable going back in the first place, what legal recourse do they have? Let's tap on the expertise of lawyer Justin Chan. He's a senior partner and head of dispute resolution practice at Tito, Isaac & Co. Justin, what recourse do employees have then if they are faced with either or both of these scenarios that we just mentioned?
Yes, I think it would be a sad situation where a person feels that they've been forced to go back to work. I mean, the first recourse, of course, would be communication, to see whether you can speak to the management, air your grievances, and see whether there's anything that they can do to help you out. Failing which, there are various platforms out there that you can use to inform the authorities that the particular company that you're working for may be breaching safe workplace practices. For example, MOM has the Snap Safe app, which allows you to remotely communicate that information. But again, I have to stress that communication must be the first port of call here, because all of us are struggling to balance safety and economy at the same time. I mean, Minister Lawrence Wong has said that we may arrive at phase 2 earlier than what was originally projected. So I think we can do more united rather than divided.
Now, Isaac, do you see the law governing workplace management becoming stricter as more businesses are allowed to resume throughout the 3 phases? Could you give us some examples of that?
Well, I think the guidelines for the workplace management are already fairly detailed. I mean, we've got safe distancing at work, we've got staggered hours, telecommuting whenever necessary, face masks to be worn. So if there are any changes to the law to make it stricter, I think it would be more piecemeal, wherein certain types of companies will be again restricted from going back to the workplace, rather than more measures on how they conduct their businesses in the workplace.
Well, Justin, amendments to the COVID-19 laws were announced this morning in time for the easing of the measures on the first day of Singapore's safe reopening. Could you go through these updates briefly, please?
Yes, not a moment too soon. 2nd of June, and we see these amendments hot off the press. Some clarifications. I think we've all heard that up to 2 people can visit their parent or grandparents. And the changes to the law clarify that it can be children or spouse of that child. So, for example, if you and your wife want to go visit mom and dad, that's allowable, subject to the caveat that you and your wife do live in the same household. The other thing that's interesting is, I mean, today you've seen that a lot of people have gone back to work on public transport. I mean, Transport Minister Koh Boon Wan had said that the capacities of the trains and buses will be cranked up to accommodate this. The law still requires you to wear a mask, because safe distancing may be quite difficult on public transport, especially with huge volumes of people. But again, there is an exception. You can wear a face shield, but you can only wear that face shield if wearing the mask leads to some severe medical conditions, you are a child below 12, or you're public speaking. So those are the 3 exemptions where you can use a face shield.
Justin, before we go, I'm just wondering, are you still conducting the legal clinic where members of the public reach out to your team?
Yes, I am indeed. I would just like to take this opportunity to thank the people that have called in. Thank you for your patience and your understanding. And we wish you all the best, and we'll see you on the other side.
Well, that was Justin Chan, a senior partner and head of dispute resolution practice at Tito, Isaac & Co.
To support the community during this pandemic, the team there sets aside 1 hour every Wednesday from 5 to 6 p.m. to answer legal questions from the public. It's by appointment, and you can register at titoizaclaw.com. Let's go back to Dylan for what's also in the news.
Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam accused the United States of double standards in its response to protests and took aim at the Trump administration for its own response to the violence sweeping the US. Washington has been highly critical of Hong Kong's response to protests and had last week announced it would remove its special trading status after Beijing announced plans to impose a new sweeping national security law. Mrs. Lam went on to say that US plans to impose trade restrictions on Hong Kong would only hurt themselves. US President Donald Trump is revealed to have been taken to a secure area last Friday as Condition Red was declared at the White House amid violent protests sparked by the death of George Floyd. In a series of tweets over the weekend, Mr. Trump had warned that Friday's protesters would have been met by vicious dogs and most ominous weapons if they dared to breach the fence around the property. President Trump announced yesterday that he will dispatch thousands of military personnel and law enforcement officers to stop the destruction of property in Washington, D.C. He also vowed to do the same in other cities if mayors and governors fail to regain control of their cities. The US is facing its most serious internal conflict in decades as nationwide protests enter a sixth day. That was also in the news. I'm Jolene Ang.
Well, those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quay. Join us tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.